Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Futurist panel. That's what I'm calling it. I can't remember what the name of it is, but it's going to be a discussion about the future. My name is Brent Satoris, and I am a futurist. I've been involved in marketing for, like a lot of these guys, for a long time. This is going to be Eric Enge. He's going to be joining us from Stone Temple, Tom Anthony from Distilled, and Duane Forrester from Yext. And they all have a depth of marketing knowledge over the years, as I'm sure you all know. But today we're all just going to be futurists, and we're all just going to talk about one important thing that we all remember as marketers, and that's that if you don't know where you're going, then you're pretty much screwed. And we've seen this time and time again where we get very siloed into what we're working on exactly in this moment, and then something substantial changes, something shifts, and we're all scrambling to try to catch up. So we wanted to put this panel together to really look at the future of marketing and the future of technology so that we can kind of start to open our minds to understand where we're going and start to envision where ourselves, our products, and our brands fit into that future. And so we're gonna discuss a couple different topics. We're gonna discuss some that are more short-term, and we're gonna discuss some that are coming in the next 5 to 10 years, and then we're gonna discuss at least one topic that goes beyond that. We'll discuss a couple short-term, and then I'll stop and do Q&A before we go on to the midterm, a little bit more Q&A, and then the long-term, and then we'll end the session. That way we kind of don't get too far stretched with the topics and the questions. So without wasting any more time, I'm gonna look at my question pool here and start us off on a topic. So the first topic that I really wanted to address to the panel is in regards to algorithms, and specifically around machine learning. We kind of whisper the term rank brain from time to time, but really looking at kind of machine learning and how it's going to affect the future of algorithms in general.
Algorithms in general, or the search algorithms?
Search algorithms, I mean,
okay.
granted.
I just get carried away.
It's still a big topic.
Yeah.
So, I actually, my history with Microsoft and Bing, I'm very fascinated with this because, I saw the early versions of this and the early growth inside Microsoft on these areas. And it's an incredibly important area. We already see the application, as you'd mentioned, of rank brain, as it's called. We see that now, and if you've paid close attention to the quality of the algorithms over the last 2 years, you've seen the dip when it was turned on, and the quality went down, and then the rapid increase in the quality went up as that machine learning did its job and learned. And now we see that continuing ascension of a more intelligent set of results, if you will. I don't believe that this is a broad application. These things are applied in very discrete areas. So while we may have it in general web search, we don't necessarily have it in mobile search, or it may not be in image search, or it may not be in discrete vertical areas. But it grows very quickly to get into those areas. An early application of this was visual recognition. So you would be able to look at an image, and we would know what it is, but how does the machine figure out that that is in fact a cat? Because we all share ears, nose, eye, mouth. Those are common traits to all animals, including humans, but that's a cat versus a person. So we
apparently AI really likes cats as well.
This is one of the first things they discovered at Google.
That's how they know that AI is like people, because they like cats.
They like cats.
Yeah. But Duane makes a really important point, which is that machine learning gets trained today. It gets trained to solve very specific problems. We're not close yet to what we would call an artificial general intelligence. People are working on that, and there's progress being made on that. But still, even in the case of rank brain, which everybody likes to think of as a synonym for the entire Google algorithm, which it isn't. But it's an important piece. It was trained to do a very specific task. It does it very well, and you're right. It was when it was collecting the data, the quality went down for a little bit, and then it got better. But they need an enormous amount of data, and they need to be able to get the right kind of data. And it's not a given that the right kind of data is available to solve every problem you might want to solve with machine learning. So that's an important thing to realize.
So what's really interesting about what both of you said is that the last, if you go back 5 years, there was probably almost no machine learning in the algorithm. And then we've seen them bolt it on. Yes. Penguin and rank brain and these other things have been bolted onto a core algorithm. But the core algorithm, as you said, hasn't been using machine learning. And I was on stage yesterday and I pointed out that Amit Singhal left about a year ago from Google, and he was replaced by John Giandrea, who was previously the head of machine learning. And Amit preferred having this handcrafted core algorithm without machine learning being part of that. He liked to understand why things ranked.
Right.
And so there's a difference between machine learning being bolted on and what happens when they start changing the core algorithm and using machine learning for that.
You know, and I think that's an incredibly important point for people to kind of wrap their heads around, right? So if you've not paid attention to, quote, artificial intelligence, it's worth looking this up. There are 3 discrete levels to AI, the first level being roughly the same as a 4-year-old. And that's kind of where we're at right now. We're maybe a 4.5-year-old with the intelligence level. And then the next level becomes a teenager. And then the general artificial intelligence that Eric refers to, what we like to think of, if you've seen the movie Her or any of the movies where there is an actual physical object that you communicate with and it does things for you, that's way off. I mean, we can see it, we can see the path to it, but it's way off. And you know, Tom's point is incredibly important in this. We are still governed by an actual algorithm, which is a mathematical equation that takes a number of different factors into place. It's hugely complex. And in some instances, something matters more than another and it's weighted and so on. That is still the core of the world that our work exists in. And then by extension, the consumer's world of what they see as a search result. It is, however, being taken over by application of machine learning against problems. Google will tell you, Microsoft will tell you, they don't know why the machine learning systems choose what they choose. There's no output. It's not like the system comes back and says, oh, I think this is a good set of results. Do you agree with me? Like a faithful pet. It just goes and does it, and then it learns.
So real quick, I mean, with the discussion around, you know, machine learning and it affecting the algorithm, what are we seeing as actual steps that people have been able to take to utilize that or to influence that? I mean, and a second question would be kind of, what do you think the next elements are?
Go for it.
So one of the things that we've been talking a little bit about Distilled is the point that Duane made, that when they've rolled out machine learning, typically we see an initial step backwards. And that's a point where we should be thinking like old school SEOs. Let's experiment. Let's see how this new algorithm is going to respond to things. And don't think about best practice or the blog posts we've read or anything. Actually go out and start playing and tinkering and seeing how does this new algorithm respond? Because these are really good opportunities for us as SEOs to adapt before everyone else does to the new algorithm. And any sort of machine learning is going to be using some sort of feedback loops. And so if you're a first mover and you're getting some good feedback loops, people are clicking on your results, etc., then the algorithm is going to pick that up and you're going to be like a step ahead of the pack. So it's an opportunity.
Well, and the other thing you can do is you can think about, because it's not hard to think about what Google will want to accomplish with those algorithms.
Yes.
They're going to want to get better and better at picking out the best content or the best user experience. They're going to want to get better and better at understanding accuracy of the information, what's the most authoritative source for things. There's nothing wrong with a strategy that says, well, why don't I invest in that? Because that's where the algorithms are going to go in the long run. We ran an experiment over the past year. It took sort of an old school-ish SEO practice of putting content on category pages on retail sites. But we did it a little differently than the way people used to do it 10 years ago. Because 10 years ago, it was like, stuff it with keywords. Get them all in there, and that'll help me rank. But instead, what we did is we did an analysis and thought long and hard about what could we create that would actually help the users on that page. And so we took that focus. And we had one result where we replaced some existing SEO text with our more usable stuff. Our stuff was up 186% after 3 months in terms of traffic. The pages we didn't work on were only up 17%. I'd call that a pretty good win.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's interesting because when we saw that quality dip happen as the machine learning kicked in, the websites that actually came up didn't come up. These were sites that were typically suppressed because they were using older standardized SEO practices that just didn't, like everybody was doing that. It wasn't that big of a deal. And the people that were ranked ahead of them initially were the people that had stepped forward, invested in deeper content, answered more questions, done the better steps. When the machine learning kicked in, it was reversed because the system did not know that that quality quotient mattered. It pulled from the original algorithm saying, hey, here's all the math, I'll go scan for that. Oh, you all should rank higher, and boom, up they went. I think as we move forward, there are some very discrete things that businesses need to focus on. First off, pay attention to the space, because any time, so when Google made the announcement, and I am vocal about this, when they came out and said, we have RankBrain, it is part of your life, I immediately knew 6 months prior to that, they had turned that on. And over that 6 months to 12 months prior, in that quality dip period, that was the beginning of it. So you know if there's an announcement, you need to go look at your data and see what happened, because it will tell you, oh, okay, we saw this happen, so that wasn't valid anymore, but then we were doing this over 6 months, and we see a spike from that, we should do more of this. And that could include things like markup for schema. The engines are very big on the concept of expertise, authority, and trust. Those three pillars matter a great deal. And to Eric's point, you can claim that now, today, you can start building that so that when the algorithm comes in and says, in a landscape of 10 million options, who should I trust? Your signals are clear. And you control all those signals. You don't let them float around. You take the activity and control all of those moments, because that then allows the machine to learn you are trustworthy and you are worth ranking higher. And then after that, it comes into the consumer side of it, which is, I think, the biggest single area that businesses have yet to fully exploit, is predicting the customer's journey. And when you do that, because that's what the engine is trying to do, that's what the algorithm is built to do, and when you start plugging into that and you start doing that, suddenly you become the best answer for every future query. And the engine grows to trust that, and it continues that cycle. So you can start now to keep pace with the intelligence that they're building.
So what's really interesting there is a couple of different things, which is like, if we have machine learning that is designing this algorithm, then, as you said, like, we necessarily haven't paid attention to the consumer journey. Machine learning algorithms aren't going to be constrained by our way of thinking. They're going to have all of the data, and they're going to plot things like that. And then you mentioned like authority and trust, and Eric mentioned like them finding new factors. And so Google have an experimental project called the Knowledge Vault, which is different to the Knowledge Graph. The Knowledge Graph is human-created facts.
So it's a Knowledge Vault where they take all of your content for themselves?
Yes, basically, yeah. And they extract it. It's much smaller at the moment, but then they published a paper a year and a half ago where they were using as an experimental ranking factor the factual accuracy of the content of your pages as a ranking factor, because it's also a signal of trust and authority. If you've got Arnold Schwarzenegger's height wrong, then we probably don't trust other things you're saying.
Right.
And so machine learning algorithms are going to find factors like that. Anything where there's data source and they understand how to interpret it. And so we're going to see this like blossoming of new ranking factors that we've never considered before.
Absolutely.
Right. The way they do that too.
Let's get yours to be the last thought on this. So seal it up.
We can stay here all evening.
Yeah, because we could do this all day.
No, you can make the last.
So I mean, the way they do that, of course, is they try the ranking factors. So do you get Arnold Schwarzenegger's height right or not? Or, well, factual accuracy. And then they actually do the test to see whether or not the quality of their search results improve, which they measure through user engagement metrics and do users perform more searches because the quality of the experience is higher, and does their ad revenue go up? And these are the things that they use to qualify all these things at the end of the day. Click-through rate and other things are part of all that. So that's where it comes down to. Yeah. So it's hard for us as humans to say, this is the factor they're going to use. It sounds sensible, right? Factual accuracy. Yeah. But we don't actually know whether relying on factual accuracy will improve the quality of the search results.
Oh.
I mean, I think it would, but
a machine learning algorithm may be always testing that, and it'll be testing it at such a fine-grained level.
And they'll figure it out.
Does it work for this niche, or does it work for that niche, etc.?
Yes.
So
shutting up. We're shutting up.
obviously we could talk about this for an hour or more. If you have questions, please make sure you get the questions into me because I will try to get them back in if we've moved on too quickly or anything during the presentation. The next topic I want to talk about is something that's kind of popped up recently. It's not something new. We've been doing it in the black hat world forever, but chatbots. You know, it's been around a lot in porn and in dating. You know, it's been around a lot in Twitter, to be honest. But it's now become kind of more proper and more organized. And I want to get your thoughts on what are we looking at for chatbots and how is it going to participate in the overall discussion when it comes to the marketing channels?
I think they're really cool, first of all, because, I mean, let's start with the basic value proposition of a chatbot, right? In a browser, you have to navigate. In principle, in a chatbot, you just say what you want. So if I want size 10 Air, Michael Jordan Air Nike shoes with black stripes, I can just say that. Now, that chatbot doesn't exist today, but that's the promise of chatbots, is that you can just go, boom, here's what I want. That's obviously a better user experience. And you can imagine this on Google Home or Amazon Alexa and just, boom, spit it out. Here's what I want. Bang, it comes back.
Yeah.
See, I think we've got, chatbots are interesting, right? Does anyone remember Microsoft Tay?
Oh,
does anyone remember that?
Yeah.
Right? So I actually, complete coincidence, I happened to find out about Tay the morning it was launched. And by that afternoon, I was in conversations with Tay that were racist and sexist. And I was asking things like, what movies are playing near me? And getting entirely inappropriate answers back. And the reason that happens is because what powers these things, hit the rewind button, is machine learning.
Right.
And you can teach the machine to behave in a certain way. So that was a group of people who let loose something with the best of intentions, and then we got a hold of it. And we as society, we as people, we as hackers, we did what we did and do what we do naturally, and it just went completely off the rails. Tay lasted I think maybe 18 hours and was shut down, but the promise is there.
So it's worth pointing out that most chatbots aren't like Tay.
No, completely agree. Completely agree. That would be like the vanguard, the front end of that concept, if you will.
Yeah.
But what's really fascinating about this is what we're moving toward is less of the interface, okay? So less of the type something in. Mobile devices have moved us toward the small screen experience, toward the, I have to be very careful, I'm economizing my keystrokes and whatnot, and into the world of voice. And chatbots are that next extension. In the early days, Facebook Messenger, one of the features they embedded in it was the ability to send money to people you're connected with. And a lot of us kind of shook our heads and thought, wow, that's odd. But they understand that the future of communications globally will be things like messenger services, within which will live the chatbot. And the chatbot will be the front end of a machine learning derived, artificially intelligent powered digital agent that will exist to serve you individually. And so that's the moment where Eric was getting at, where we get to say, I would like a pair of size 10 Air Nikes, go find them. And it goes and it finds them. All of the parameters are met that you've already discussed with it, price, location, shipping, delivery dates, all of it, and it just makes the purchase on your behalf. That's where that ends up. So if you're thinking that Siri and Google Assistant and Cortana and these services are gonna be, kind of what's next, I actually think we're gonna skip a lot of that. We will adopt these things, but generally, society will skip that and move directly to the voice interface with the chat scenario.
So you think the chatbot would essentially, in what we're talking about, would essentially kind of be skipped in practical application just because we'll
No, I think we're going to skip to this generation and go to chat, right? Because when you start thinking about things, and I know that you'll light up at this, augmented reality and virtual reality, you're not going to be sitting in your home with your augmented reality scenario in your life and then call up a virtual keyboard and type on the virtual keyboard. You will literally discuss what you want out loud with the entity that exists in the augmented space.
Well, that's kind of where this whole thing is a little bit weird because, I mean, we're essentially taking automated phone systems and a lot of these things where there's database queries where you're just taking the same queries that you would put into a menu or a structure and you're turning it into a conversation, which doesn't excite me.
It doesn't excite you, but the next generation have grown up in messenger apps, and that's their native way of interacting.
What I'm saying is I think we have to get more to a Cortana or something where there's a higher level of communication, right? I mean, voice search, when we talk about that, not getting too far into it, really has the problem of not being a conversation. It's a structured dialogue.
It's very directive.
Not yet.
So where do we get to a point with chatbots where it becomes more of a conversation and less just of a structure? Is there anybody doing that today?
I think that will start to happen, but I think there's two halves that make chatbots interesting. We've been talking about the effect it's going to have on the world that we live in, but some of the fascinating stuff I've seen about chatbots is in the emerging markets, which is something that Jess Stiles, who spoke last year about, because chatbots, as Eric said, you don't need to have navigation or all that stuff. They work really well when you've got low bandwidth connection to the internet. And we're getting all of these people who are flooding online with projects like Google's Balloons and Internet.org and all of that stuff, who are bringing this whole new community of people online. And chatbots are a really good way for them to just get plugged in and start doing stuff.
Right.
And we're already starting to see that have an effect.
Yeah. And it might be that the only thing they have in terms of, I mean, their app might be Facebook Messenger. And I mean, I can go into Facebook Messenger right now and order flowers for my wife from 1-800-Flowers using a chatbot, or what is it, Poncho, the weather bot, if I'm remembering that. It's another. So these apps are already there, and we can get them here. But Tom's exactly right. In emerging markets, it's already absolutely.
There's already 33,000 bots on Messenger, or more than that now. Yeah. There's like tons of them, but in the emerging markets, and we're already starting to see these places that are just getting connected to the internet. It's completely changing the economy there. There was an article last week about a Chinese village that has a population of 2,500 people, and they've been farmers their whole life. Then one person got connected to the internet, and they stopped farming, and they started turning wool into yarn and selling it online. They became a millionaire in a farming village. And now there's a couple of dozen millionaires in this tiny little village because they were like, connect me too. And suddenly the economy has completely changed just because they got connected by a really low bandwidth connection to the internet. And bots are the natural place for them to plug in.
And they're working in their own local market, right? I mean, not necessarily local in this sense, but local in the sense that people, similar connections, similar.
So if you look back, I don't know if you remember this campaign or if anybody does, but one of the things Home Depot did very early on with Twitter was they were able to get into the API and identify people's geo-position when they were updating. And when people would mention that they were going to paint their house or they were going to purchase something for their house, they would ping them and say, we have a store half a mile down your street if you want to come in and get 10. And people were kind of creeped out by it because they didn't enter into the conversation willingly. How are we seeing chatbots implemented, and where is it going to take off when people stop letting you know that you're talking to a chatbot? What are the concerns? What do you view kind of in this? Should companies only participate in a way that is they're being asked something and then they're participating, or is it okay to start reaching out?
No, so I think they'll be used for marketing as well. So that's some of the other stuff that Jess Stiles had in her presentation. She talked about, like, once you've connected with these bots and you've got them on your phone, like, consider that there's more people on the top 5 messenger apps than there are on the top 5 social networks. Consider that bot messages have a higher open rate than app notifications and emails. And so suddenly, you've got this whole new way of reaching out to people and interrupting them that you can reach more people and you have a higher chance of success. Yes, please, sign me up. I'll have some of that.
See, now I think what's going to happen is we are going to see a true generational moment happen here, okay? I do not want to be interrupted by these things. I want to go in, ask a question, get out, and be left alone. Very situational. The millennial generation coming up and the Gen Z generation behind them, so the kids that are in their early teenage years, they don't care about those interruptive moments. They're totally okay with that. They just are trained. They have trained themselves to filter through it all. And so, Brent, you were actually showing a video lunch before this, and it was this augmented reality moment where this lady has everything in her world is coming to her, and it's advertising, and it's messages from work, and it's everything, but it's all layered visually from what she can see. And those younger generations will be able to process that a whole lot better because that's where they entered into the conversation. And so I think that for the next few years, what we're going to see is we're going to see things like invitations. So if I'm a member of the email list for a large retailer, we'll say IKEA, for example, and they have a bot about shopping and home decor and whatever else, then I may want to engage with that bot and talk about these things. And then you get me deeper by then using that as the entry point to the app that lets me see your furniture in my room on my device.
Yeah.
And that's a nice, easy way to get me into you and to prove that value to me, versus just showing up in a conversation. When I left Microsoft, I posted on Twitter saying that I'd been fired from the company and was looking for work. The TSA reached out to me within minutes. And the TSA is the organization that does security at the airports in America. And they offered me a job on Twitter. And that was very strange.
Yes.
And then I started learning that they do this. It's a common thing. They actually look across Twitter and other social media for people that have lost jobs, and they immediately contact them and say, you should sign up to come work for us.
Oh, interesting.
Right? And so that to me was this kind of record scratch moment where I was like, well, that's weird.
I really don't want to be patted
I'll
down
tell
by
you,
you
the
at
thing
now.
that excites
that is very strange.
The thing that excites me
Not
the
happy.
most about chatbot really is kind of much further forward, and that's that, as you guys know from conversation with me, my belief that artificial intelligence at some point becomes just the same as intelligence,
completely.
period.
When
And
we
so
reach
for
this,
me,
there's no question.
chatbot is the premise for learning how to deal with artificial intelligence.
Yes.
And at a certain point, when we
Yes.
fine-tune it to where the conversation's indistinguishable,
Absolutely.
then we really set the precedence for how we open up a new era of an equal standing with artificial
Well,
intelligence.
what's going to be interesting is we don't have this conversation about do we notice that moment and does it matter? Because we are all, as a society, as a group of consumers, we don't care. We don't care if we're having the conversation with the person or the artificial intelligence. What we care about is getting the answers we want, gaining the efficiency.
Right, but what happens in all of this, and you said it, Duane, is like we're no longer, the people no longer are going to, our kids, our next generation, doesn't think of it as an interruption. We use the term interruption, which probably has something to do with how we react to it.
Exactly.
As opposed
values,
to, it's just my information stream.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's bots of my friends all coming in by messenger.
That's right, and I'll have some
notifications.
way of managing that, and they'll all be running continuously, and I'll have one in central focus, and the others will be over there, and I just learned to tune that out because this is the space I'm thinking about right
And they're
now.
going to have a lot more time because they're not going to be spending any time in an email inbox like we are.
No, and this technology is going to retrain society in how we process information. And marketers need to understand that, because how you integrate into that stream is going to become extraordinarily important. I mean, we're talking about a time here when we're beyond a browser, we're beyond a keyboard, and therefore we are largely not on the internet as we think of it today. So sure, SEO is dead, whatever. It's never going to die. The data is what's important, but how you get fed into the data and whether you are trusted enough to be put into those scenarios where you are part of that stream of information being handed to the consumer, that is the new field of optimization. I mean, that granted is a number of years down the road here, right?
But it's just what you're calling SEO.
Exactly.
Your label gets applied to something.
Tom, marketers right now, people in the room talking about chatbots, what, in your opinion, is available to people today to start playing with chatbots?
There are already a whole bunch of libraries that you can go away, and it is so easy. It's easier for you to set up a chatbot and start experimenting with that than it is to do an app or anything else. And these platforms are pretty good, and you can train them. You give examples of the types of things that people might ask, and then you give the examples of what you might expect, and the bots will learn, and you can plug that into your data. Like Wit.ai is one of these platforms, and we use that to build a Slack bot, just for internally, and people can ask our Slack bot, like, where is Tom today? And I'll look it up and it'll answer.
Yeah, there's a stand-up bot for Slack that asks you, what did you do today?
Well,
what did you accomplish?
And so they're basically using this library, and so basically, if you've got any sort of data source, which if you've got an app or anything you already do, then you can go and you can use AI to train, and then you can use one of these frameworks to make that a messenger bot on Facebook's Messenger, and already start.
If you want to script one for yourself, I mean, if you have a very simple application, I mean, I had one. I wanted to build a chatbot, so I wanted people to come in and do something in one of the data studies that we do. And it took me an hour to create a script. In another hour, I had a basic chatbot, and I used that as the instruction manual for people. And I did it because I wanted them to go through the steps in order. And if I had sent them to a web page that gave them the steps, people would skip the third step and go to the fourth step. And I actually could control it. So I had an application where I could use it right now, where it was a better experience. And it took me 2 hours.
So the only thing I'd warn if you're going to design your own bot is it's all very well throwing one together, testing it, but don't let that mislead you if it doesn't succeed. It's quite hard to design a good bot, especially with the wrong generation to do it. If you ever have a bot that asks you a question and says then, press 1 for this option or press 2 for that option, you're doing it wrong. Because that's not how the next 2 generations are expected to work. They're just expecting to talk back and forth. And so you need to make sure you design that bot well. Don't design a crap one and then be like, oh, it doesn't work.
In 2015, January, Eric Schmidt was at the World Economic Forum, and was asked, what's the future of the internet? And his response was that it would disappear, in a simple statement. Not necessarily to the sense that it would completely disappear, but that it would become seamless in our everyday lives.
The internet or the web?
The internet is what he said. Was asked.
So I think he misunderstood the question.
His focus, that the internet would become seamless. You wouldn't see an interface.
It becomes
it would become integrated into our lives. So essentially that, in our conversation, it got translated to the death of the browser. And I wanted to have a discussion about, because I mean, we've been talking about this for years. There's been discussions that over time, the website's gonna become obsolete. You know, you're gonna have all these apps. That was the first thing, that we'd be overtaken by apps, and then we have augmented reality, we have wearable devices. So we're getting to a point where it's starting to become more realistic that the browser at some point is going to disappear. What are your viewpoints on the browser disappearing?
So
timeline, what are your thoughts?
Last year at SMX, I made the prediction that by SMX 2019, there'll be more sessions that target non-web technologies than there'll be that target web-based technologies. Because when I started talking about personal assistants at SMX 2 years ago, and then it was in the future track, but now in all the tracks I've heard people talking about intelligent personal assistants. And intelligent personal assistants are just one part of this. We've been talking apps have been exploding and they're not web, and then intelligent personal assistants are taking more people away from the web, and then we're going to see other smart devices coming into the home. I'm building a smart mirror for my house, and so that's going to have a whole bunch of information. At the moment, I look up the news and I look up the train times and stuff on my phone on the web, and that's going to be on this other screen. And so we're going to be moving. Some of this is going to be new types of interactions that didn't exist before the web. And then some of it is going to be stealing interactions from the web. And the web will become web might continue to grow, but not at the rate of everything else. And so it's going to become proportionally a smaller and smaller part of what we should be concerning ourselves with.
And this is an interesting question, because if we look at this from the perspective of the web becoming more integrated and seamlessly a part of our lives, do me a favor, raise your hand if you've seen the movie Iron Man. Okay, if you've not seen this movie, I encourage you to watch it, at least maybe the first 15 minutes or so, because there's a scene where a lady gets up and she walks through the main character's home, and as she walks through, the house comes to life. The lights are turned on, the curtains are pulled back so she has a view of the ocean. Data and information starts showing up on the glass window that she can look through, but also see at the same time. Stock information, news headlines, the weather-related information, and because the owner of the house likes to surf, the surf report is played audibly so that you can hear that. And I think this is what the integration of the internet looks like. We've got a massive influx through the Internet of Things, devices being connected to the internet. And if you put the security concerns aside from that, and you look at the ability to take data and increase the footprint of it it becomes exponentially more useful to the consumer. I walk around my home, I have Google Home, and I talk to it, and I get information. I have Alexa, and I shop online by telling Alexa what I want. That is what's happening, and the consumers are going there. Now, the next generation of consumers, beyond millennials, they're going to go even farther than that, where it's going to be things like a smart mirror built into your home. There is already paint that you can buy that's on the market that is capable of conducting electricity, which means it is capable of housing a screen, so you will paint a screen on your wall and be able to display information in it. Like, we're at those stages are now. So it's incredibly important that businesses, that agencies understand all of this. I mean, where I am at Yext, we talk about intelligent search, and it's this concept of managing your footprint. So for a business, that means a whole lot. There's all kinds of different things. There's the official web page, there's your products, your services, hours of operation, whatever it is. But it also expands into that consumer's mindset. And how does the consumer move through their day? And then how do you be a part of that as a business? And that perspective, this is what's going to drive what Tom is talking about, where, 2 years from now, every single session is going to be beyond talking about artificial intelligence and machine learning, because that will be so normal. We won't be talking about technical SEO because it largely won't matter. A lot of the hurdles will be behind us. The engines will be smarter at what they're doing, and how they develop trust against signals will change. And you won't be able to just optimize your content on a page, because that won't give you trust. Sure, you should use proper grammar and commas and semicolons and headers, because that builds usefulness. But after that, it's all about these other experiences that resonate with the consumer. That is going to be a huge area for optimization.
It kind of reminds me of, I always use the example of the browser going away as the same as like the phone book going away, right? I mean, the phone book still had a lot of good information, but when you realized that you could easily just log into Google and search for whatever you wanted and find a phone number, that was the last time you ever picked up a phone book, right? Once you realize that you no longer have to go open a browser and start searching for information, it's just readily available.
The friction is gone.
If the friction's gone, you'll never open it again.
Now let's talk a little bit about where this is going to end up before we get to the augmented and virtual reality pieces of this conversation. You can't have a conversation about anything like this with Brent without it going there eventually.
Well, that's where it's going.
Yeah, I know it's where it's going. So,
and not just because Brent wants it to go there.
That's true. Right. But, and I'm just going to expand on what Duane was saying a little bit, which is, what's your defense as a business? Your defense is to be in demand. You have to do the right thing so that your business is in demand, so as all these changes are unfolding, that you're the thing that is the best answer for things. Because in so many of these environments, it's going to be, you just have one available answer. They're going to have the default answer it gives you. And yes, the user will be able to ask for more choices, but that's going to be harder than it is today. Today, when I look at my phone, it's like the next choice is that far down the screen.
Yeah, there's still a list.
Right. And it's not going to be a list. You're going to get that one verbal answer, that one suggested thing, and you're going to say yes or no to that. And then you might say more choices. And then finally you get into the also-rans, the people who aren't going to get nearly as much revenue and market share. So you have to start thinking about how you're going to protect your brand by building your brand and being in demand from consumers.
Well, the one thing I will say on that, and then I'll jump right to you, Sue, because I see you're like ready to jump in. I do believe that we do find ourselves sometimes pretensing the way we think it's going to be based on what we want it to be. And I do think that most people have wanted variety in their life, and I don't think people are going to be satisfied. So you may find that it's visually represented first, and then you can see a circle of the other options, so you can, I want to see what this is. Or there's going to be some mechanism, because users are going to be unsatisfied with that type of environment.
So today in Google Home, you do that now. You get one answer from the voice system, but the app on your phone actually shows you more answers. So if you open the app and you go in and look in the app, you'll see the top 3 answers.
But I think even in vocal,
so
they're going to
Google
get
have a couple of research projects that are not very well known. You have to find the academic papers where they talk about them, where they talk about basically trying to solve this problem of having this voice interface that has limitations. So they've got one project which is called Glissando, which is their research where, this is a guitar joke for you, I guess, where they understand, or they've been developing like gesture-based control systems, but gesture's good for like, oh, well, if I've got a Magic Leap screen, I'm swiping through stuff, but it's not very good for feedback. And so they've developed a system that will give audio cues to you when you're doing gesture-based control of any system, and it'll say, sorry, I didn't get that, or how far, shall I skip 10? And they've got another project called Google Soli, S-O-L-I, where they're trying to develop the capability to control things with what they call micro gestures. And they use like radar. And basically, they've got a system where you can do like tiny little motions like this. So you could, basically the idea is they understand that we can consume information visually much faster. And we interact with our hands for controlling things. If I want to adjust volume with my Alexa, it's like volume up, volume down, volume 4, but minor details. Whereas if I could just do okay, and I get the immediate feedback. And so they're trying to solve these sorts of problems.
Well, I also think that there's going to be a sense of us not trying to solve these problems in the way we've solved our past problems, where we think we want to have one answer. I could imagine simply having a conversation. Again, it gets back to why does it have to be such a static response and not just a discussion? If I'm asking a virtual assistant, where's a good Mexican restaurant, they'll say, well, there's 5 in the area. Would you like to see all 5?
Would you like to see
Would you
them?
like to
That's
see
the
what
point.
you can afford?
You're going to have the hybrid interface. You're going to be speaking your commands, and depending on where you are, you're going to be consuming the information, the results in different ways. If you're just talking to your like Alexa or your Google Home, it might give you a voice thing, but if you've got your phone right with you, it might notice that. Or if you're near your smart mirror, it might throw it up on your smart mirror, and we're going to have like screens everywhere, and things like technologies like Magic Leap, where you can just have like it blasted into your eyes. So you're going to have like this visual screen.
And then the Internet of Things, where it knows how much money you have, it knows what your blood count is, your blood sugar is, it knows what your tables are available. Go ahead.
No, it's all great stuff.
I'm quite interested, Tom. You keep talking about the smart mirror. Do you spend a lot of time in front of the mirror?
Okay, so
quickly, like on Eric's point, like Eric talked about what companies need to do, create demand from the top down. Like I'm a tech kid, I always think about the bottom up. What's a technical solution to that? And so, really quickly, like, we used to have like call centers that were an interface into our business. I could phone up, I could check, have you got that thing in stock? And I could place an order. Then we created web, and web's replaced that, and it became this connection into your interface. And now we're talking about the webless world, and so we're going to have all these other devices that are basically just that same thing. But the interesting thing is that they're all going to be based off of the same data. Apps, smart mirrors, IPAs, all of those are
your
going to be
personal data.
Well, and so keep in mind, too, that a lot of this is going to be designed by people who aren't sitting on the stage that are growing up in this environment right now. And to what you said earlier, their perception of how to approach the problem is going to be completely different.
So, like, the main thing we could be working on, or should be working on in the short term, is basically you've got this web interface into your business. Start making sure that you start taking it seriously to develop an API endpoint into your business. If you've got an app, you've probably already got one, because that allows you to build chatbots that plug into that same API. It allows you to experiment with like Alexa or other intelligent personal assistants that plug into that same API. Once you've got that API, it allows you to exponentially start experimenting with all these things much faster. So that's the thing we should be developing.
One other recommendation, really, as we start to go towards this, is to spend some time really building your connection points for your audience. Having a good mailing list, having a good list of people, getting good ratings now, having yourself continuing to evolve, because one of the big concerns is how do I get exposure? How do I get authority when the system's cut 100 to 5?
Well, and this is interesting.
Creating the demand that I was talking about, having those.
And this is interesting because this goes hand in hand with what you guys are saying. Reviews are going to be extraordinarily important, not because other customers go and read the review and then come to see you, but because the systems use the data to understand if you should be the one answer they talk about. Because
so we do
that's paramount.
We actually have one. A second question has.
So whilst he's looking at the questions, you asked about the smart mirror. How many different pots of hair gel have you bought since you've been in this country 3 days?
Actually, 3.
Yeah.
So we have
Just wanted to leave that dangling out there.
we had one question come in that kind of leads us into our last topic, and I'll read the question. It said, what will happen with the AI will interact with our neurological elements when we start to have superhumans? I mean, because that's where essentially we talk about minimalizing the difference between the information in our brain at some point, right? So I don't think anybody doubts that at some point in the next 50 years we'll have implantable devices, and we'll start to have interfaces that are seamless, that interact directly with our brain, with our neuro systems. What does it look like in a world of superhumans?
So there's a step. Go, Eric.
Well, so we're talking about, now you don't have the mirror, because the mirror is like built into you in the first place. And since...
This is where immortality comes in.
Yeah, no, right. So
Tom, thank you.
Brent's going to be immortal, by the way. He's already decided that. And we have this, no, I won't get into the argument now. But, it's going to be embedded within you, and that information that you're looking for is going to be immediately available, and it's, and the interface is going to be here, and it's going to become a matter of how does it work? You talk about all the time, Brent, about they're going to be controlling proteins and things and
brain patterns,
and brain patterns. And
it's going to have a real societal shift, like education changes, because you're not going to sit in a history lesson learning when the Battle of Hastings was, because you're just going to know that if you need to know it.
So Ray Kurzweil from Google, this is at least 5 years ago now, he actually went on stage at TED and explained that scientifically this is possible today.
Sure.
The ability to learn by consuming a pill.
Protein pills, yeah.
Protein pills. Because everything that we have stored in our memories is actually stored in the form of a protein inside our brain. So if you want to take the history class, you pay the school for the history pill, you consume the pill, you wake up the next morning, and it's as if you have been to class and taken in all of that knowledge. And so now you suddenly have all of that knowledge of history. And how do we deal with this?
And in Asia here last week, they actually did the first study of this, and they actually were able to teach through injecting into the brain the first matrix-style learning.
The pill will still cost $55,000.
Oh, it will. There's no question
and I think the coolest interface is in my belief, I believe we get to a point where you don't even notice this anymore. You don't really have, it's not that you're questioning what's the best restaurant, it's just that you innately know.
Yes.
Well,
because it's just in your brain.
They've paid to put it into a pill as an advert, and so you learn this fact that that's the best restaurant.
That's the other question that's come in.
Yeah, but
that's the other question that's come in is about, in Germany specifically, there's a very big discussion and concern on privacy.
Yes.
So while we're talking through this, let's add into there the layer of how do we control privacy?
So this is where I think this goes, okay? Because superhuman, when we think about this, don't think about, somebody with huge muscular power or incredible off-the-charts intelligence. Think of it in terms of who we are today and a noticeable but modest increase in perception, our ability to reason, these kinds of things. I think one of the leading areas where this will be applied, these technologies will be applied, is in healthcare. With the ability that we have on the market right now a lens, a contact lens that you can wear that will take your blood sugar level, report it to an app on your phone, which communicates to your doctor.
And take pictures.
Yes, and it's things like that that I think will be the first applications. So then healthcare gets to plug into that data stream. And now we start having the scenario where, well, if you have the ability to transmit that data and take a photograph with this, then you automatically have the ability to present me with information. And so if I've signed up, that's where the notice from my doctor will be flashed visually. I will see it, no one else will see it, and I will know then I have a new message from my doctor, and I need to go either look it up, look at it in my visual field of reference, or in some way find out what my doctor is telling me. And so I think that the medical profession will be one of those first areas, because I used to joke a lot about, I want the first email implant, so I just get it and off I go, but I think we're still generations away from being able to figure out how to wire hardware into our brain at a level that our brain uses it as exponential storage or Wi-Fi access or things like that. We're not on that track right now. However, we are on track to have the human body put a lot of information out there about itself, and there are many industries that want to know about that.
Yes.
Yeah, so there's going to be really interesting stepping stones.
Absolutely. And I mean, like, I can see us getting to the point, right, where, you know, this notion of, I would like to become an SEO overnight. Does anybody want that? Great. Well, for $10,000, I will sell you a pill from DuaneForrester.com. It's the DuaneForrester.com pill. And for $10,000, you become an expert in this exciting field.
I'm picking hair gel.
Yeah, like that is going to like just crop
and
up,
that might
right?
sound, a lot of these things might sound crazy, but one of the things that I do every morning in coffee is sit there and read the MIT reports and read
exactly.
PsychWork. And this is stuff that's really happening. I mean, the understanding,
Yeah.
I mean, when we start talking about CRISPR and genetic sequencing, you start talking about the ability for you know, the genetic ladder to essentially take the elements from other genetic ladders. They've now successfully put something like 2 terabytes of data or something in DNA, so they were able to put a ton of information.
A gram of DNA is capable of holding 215 petabytes of data. So if you think of the entire history of humanity, every piece of data we have ever created to this exact second, all of that would fit, if housed in DNA, in the bed of a pickup truck. Like, that's incredible.
And this is stuff that they're testing right now.
Right now.
So you start to see data storage being something like DNA, or being able to be small enough to fit into any kind of wearable device. You see the contact lenses allowing you. But see, that's why I love Magic Leap, because I really think that with Magic Leap, and if you're not familiar with Magic Leap, it's basically they got the patents and the technology to understand how the brain interprets light and builds the images in your brain. So instead of having some device in front of your eyes, you're essentially getting light shot into your eye that paints into your brain the picture of what they want to show you. And I think that we could really get to a point where you could be in a room where there's just the proper light being refracted at you to show you all of these type of things, to put into your world whatever you need and all of the data. So we might get to a point where we don't necessarily need to have all of these things in us, because right now the easiest path is going to be, how do we build things innocuously that
works with
influence
your
how
senses.
your body reacts. And,
but let's start shifting in a different direction, if I can suggest, which is like, we'll start doing your talk that's coming up. So the shift in the direction, you know, it's really going to be more about augmented reality and all this, not virtual reality, right? So that's really what is going to take off. I mean, we could make the joke, of course, in high school we experimented with things that gave us virtual reality and all that. But really it's going to be much more about augmented reality, because it's much more practical. And there's so many different ways to do that today.
Well, the majority of your day is spent in the real world and not spending time going into a virtual world. So virtual reality will bring it to our faces, because everybody's going to want to watch a movie where they're sitting in the movie. They're going to want to play a game where they're actually in the world. But once they get done playing, augmented reality is going to be the rest of their day.
That's right.
So what's interesting is that, like, as you said, Duane, like, we talk about having implants and we expect this, like, huge shift in everything, but if we break down everything we've talked about like improved perception, improved availability of information, being able to consume information, but the stuff we talked about, how there's going to be screens all around us, already gets us a lot of the way there. It's not going to be this cliff edge moment. We've talked about like the ability to have like more data stored, etc., which is going to be possible, and then it's like the ability to access new data or interact with the world around us. And we're also going to see that happen incrementally in the improvements in wearable technologies and that sort of stuff. Google have a project called Google Sensei, where they're putting bioimpedance into devices. So as soon as I pick up a phone, it knows that it's me, unlocks it, loads my information. And then if Duane picks up my phone, it knows it's Duane. And so there's going to be devices all around us. They've got it built into a chair. So you sit down and it knows it's you. And so our environment is going to do so much of this work for us, because I sit down in a chair, and if Magic Leap throws up a screen and I'm able to just speak what I want, that's not a long way from me having that implanted in my head. But in order of the technology to get it in the head is a long way away, but we're going to get a lot of the way there.
The emphasis is going to go more towards processing information effectively. And then, of course, there's things that they can do to help you with that as well. Right? So they could do things to break down the barriers of your current level of intelligence and give you more skills at processing all the data at the same time.
So today we have a lot of software as a service, SaaS models. What we are starting to see right now, and will have a massive impact on businesses, is MaaS, mobility as a service. And this is what Tom's talking about, where right now you can go into downtown Munich, you can take a bicycle, you can ride that bicycle to another location, put it in a rack and walk away. You have a rental agreement, you have access, you are mobile, you have the ability to be mobile because of that service. Well, what's going to happen is people won't want devices. Auto manufacturers have already seen this shift where people are buying cars later and they're spending less money on it. So they're moving toward a model of rider sharing, driverless cars, the automated cars. That is going to fundamentally shift consumer behavior to the point where I will simply walk up to a vehicle, it will know who I am, it will automatically be my taxi cab to go wherever I want to go because I am a member of this affinity program. And within that will be a series of devices that I can take with me and leave wherever I want because I don't need this physical object that I pay for.
You don't need your own one.
What I need is the
and
interface with the data layer, and this is it, and that is it, and that is it, and that is it.
Right. So real quick,
so one quick thing to wrap this back to the start. Eric mentioned like the additional processing power and stuff. To wrap it all the way back to where we started this conversation with like the conversational interfaces, one of the things that conversational interfaces is going to see, which is going to impact SEO in the next 18 months, I predict, is what I call computational searches. Okay, I want to know this piece of information, so I need the search engine. I'm going to ask a query. It's going to grab some information from there, It's going to blend them together to produce my results. I want to know how many restaurants are in this area that have this level of review.
Yes.
This data is coming from different places.
Yes.
It's going to get it. It's going to do some computation of that data for me and give that result back to me. We're going to be seeing those sorts of searches being done. And that's going to be a very real avenue of concern for marketers because you might only have one piece of that data.
Right.
So to close us out, because we're essentially, we've run our time, and I know we could keep doing this for a long time, and we probably will. If you catch any of us out there, we're all amped up at this point. So, but Eric, if we can kind of finish on one kind of thought from you. Obviously, everybody who's here is interested in being up to speed with what's happening and where things are moving. And what would be your advice to people who have a business, who are into marketing, who are into SEO? What kind of mindset, what kind of activity level should people be focusing, and how can they do that to keep up with these continuous changes? If you would advise somebody on how to stay up with this, how would you advise them?
Well, I mean, there's really two things. I think the first thing I would say is, if you didn't see Will Reynolds' keynote and all the emphasis he put on understanding how users are thinking and how they're acting, I think there was a great deal of useful information in there. And you need to immerse yourself in how your potential customers are acting and what they want and what they're looking for, and that's a big part of your business. But I think the other thing is you just have to have a passion, or you need somebody in your company that has a passion for understanding what's happening and is really focused on what's the next thing that we're likely to be seeing. And you don't have to do everything. Pick a few good things and do really, really well at those, and I think you'll be just fine.
Awesome. If you guys can join me in thanking our panel today, just want to say thank you for you guys and the information.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
And that concludes.
That's it.